So Pixelbush released his year 9, it's mislabeled 10, review of Dead by Daylight, and I I have thoughts on a certain section, as you can probably guess. I this is just to fully be clear, this is an unscripted kind of rambling about my own thoughts on the Five Nights at Freddy's chapter section, because, well, I am a Five Nights at Freddy's super fan, and while I don't disagree with some things that were said, I feel like a lot of what was said isn't really true. Before I did this, I did go back and also rewatch, so I have watched it before, but I wanted to rewatch Pixelbush's FNAF Potential and Problems video, because I wanted to get a better baseline of where Pixelbush stands in terms of knowledge and understanding about Five Nights at Freddy's as a franchise, personal opinions on it aside. Now, I do want to make it clear, this isn't like a personal attack or anything on Pixelbush. I very much respect someone who can be so dedicated to Skull Merchant and then do incredibly well, by the way, on the Hens and Odds Best of the Worst showcase. Congrats to Pixelbush for that performance. It was genuinely like a really, really, really good start, and I think it ended up being, if I'm not mistaken, because I wrote the stats down to talk to friends, the most kills in a match goes to Pixelbush on Dead Dog. But that's not the point of this video. I have a lot of thoughts on Ghostface, obviously, as a Ghostface main, but this is I want to discuss the criticisms of the FNAF chapter in this video, because I don't agree with some of them. I really don't. Not to say that, like let's get the stuff I do agree with out of the way. I think the map is fantastic. I'm actually working on my own review of the FNAF chapter as a Five Nights at Freddy's veteran and someone who's been with the franchise since the first game, and I have a lot of thoughts on how this was implemented and how this franchise was really, really well done when it was being brought in. But I'm actually a bit more harsh on the map than Pixelbush is in this video, which I think is really funny. I'm a lot more harsh, I guess, just because I expected a more interesting exterior to the map, I guess. And actually, I have my script. I can just... This is unscripted rambling. Yeah, the main highlight of the map is definitely the pizzeria, and I think that's like the main focus when Pixelbush discusses the map, because the map's exterior, the pizzeria's exterior, I should say, I said it feels incredibly lazy, and I still stand by that, but I will finish working on that video and get into that later. And then he also brings up Springtrap's perks being total garbage, and I also agree. They are outclassed by so many other alternatives, and Pixelbush names a few. I know Fear being outclassed by Spies from the Shadows, a big one, but I don't disagree with that, and I also do not disagree with calling out Scott Cawthon. That might be a surprise. You're like, oh, if you're a dedicated FNAF fan, shouldn't you be like defending Scott and the ground he walks on? No, there are a lot of criticisms about FNAF as a franchise and Scott as a person that I think are perfectly valid from this video. FNAF lore is a mess. It's been a mess. It has the reputation for a reason. And while I have a very good through line, especially from the FNAF 1 up to UCN, I'm a little shakier from Help Wanted on, because I just didn't bother buying or reading any of the books, which are debatably canon. Yay. I have a very good through line of when Scott was like the only writer on the franchise, which I think is weird, because as Pixelbush makes many jabs, and rightfully so, out, Scott is not a great writer for this franchise. Now, I do want to point out that the whole issue with FNAF was that Scott did not just sit down and plan it out after FNAF 1, because FNAF 1 was not supposed to get popular. It's not supposed to blow up. FNAF 1 was a final attempt to make a game that Scott did not expect to blow up, and it came mostly out of spite, actually. Pixelbush in the Potential and Problems video says it's a crisis in faith and whatnot. And I don't think that's inherently incorrect. I think that was part of it. The other big thing that Pixel Bush doesn't acknowledge is that FNAF was made as a direct response to a criticism of his previous game, Chipper and Sons Lumber Co., where a reviewer, I believe her name is Stephanie Sterling, likened the animal characters to creepy animatronics. And Scott took that, kind of out of spite, and made Five Nights at Freddy's 1. And then he put it up on Desora, and it blew up, and then it got greenlit on Steam, partially because of Markiplier playing it and that video blowing up, because he played that demo, and then that's where we are. Now there's a franchise, and Steel Wool's... I have a lot of thoughts on Steel Wool handling it. I'm not going to get into that here. But, so... I can see why Scott wanted to rush these games as much as possible and did not think the story through as much as he should have. I'm not saying I agree with it or that it was a good idea. I'm saying I understand. But that's not the point of this, because at the end of the day, yeah, Pixel Bush is kind of right. FNAF's lore is a mess, especially to someone who's not invested in the franchise. I can see how Five Nights at Freddy's, in terms of understanding the story, is a very, very big thing that turns people away. So I'm not gonna use Pixel Bush. I don't want to use Pixel Bush's not knowing of certain things as a reason not to take them seriously, because Pixel Bush has much more authority on Dead by Daylight as a whole than I do. I've only been playing the game for a year, but I have more authority on FNAF, I feel like, so I want to discuss why I feel criticism of the Five Nights at Freddy's related aspects specifically aren't correct. I'm not here to argue Springtrap's strength on a tier list. I think the comment that the power is not super strong is fair. He has averaged out to B-ish tier, B- about now, I believe is the common consensus. I could be wrong on that. But I do want to discuss just a couple other things that are brought up. So let's just get into it. The first criticism I want to talk about is the first one that I wrote down when I watched the video, or that snippet of the video a second time, which is that the lore brought over for Springtrap's character is brief, borderline incoherent, debatably existent with prior canon, and devoid of anything remotely interesting in terms of character or plot. Now, there's a lot to be said about this in terms of FNAF as a whole, but specifically stating with the lore relevant to Dead by Daylight, I don't really agree. I do get the sentiment that they could have gone more into William Afton's character and backstory to better set up the build up to the spring locking within the bio in game. But just so we're clear, here's a video of me reading the bio. I'll probably mute the game sounds just so you can hear my voice. But yeah. Deep within the abandoned Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, William Afton ran from the ghosts of his victims. He frantically put on his beloved Spring Bonnie costume, the disguise he wore while committing his heinous crimes, to hide from the pursuing spirits. But fate had different plans for Afton. Something activated the spring locks within the Spring Bonnie costume. Metal clamped against metal, piercing the murderer and trapping him in his costume. As he screamed, the checkerboard floor rose up to meet him, and everything went black. Thus was Springtrap born, from the death of a murderer. He awoke to a familiar sound, his body a pillar of agony. The ghosts that had tormented him were gone, the walls surrounding him were decomposing, the floor beneath him falling away in moldy patches. How much time had transpired since the spring locks tore through his body and fixed him within his costume? The urge to kill lingered within him still, the thirst long left unquenched. The sound filled his ears again. Children's laughter. Were children playing in the kitchen? Springtrap rose to his feet, adjusting to his new body, and marched toward the sounds. He picked up speed as he moved. Walking turned to running. He rushed into the kitchen and found... nothing. No children, no games, no laughter. Just a swirling mass of black fog enveloping the far wall. Springtrap examined the fog. Curiosity tightened his grip on him. As he stared into the darkness, his distended eyes could see shapes emerge within the fog. Who were they? It didn't matter. They were his victims now. Somehow he knew the hunt could go on forever. All he had to do was step into the fog. Okay, that's the bio in-game for Springtrap. And if you've played FNAF 3, you kind of know where this is picking up. It's the post-Night 5 minigame is where it picks up. And it does not give you much, and I understand why that could be very annoying. I think the part that it's brief, but I don't necessarily know that Springtrap needed more, because the potentially frustrating part of it, but the ultimate truth is that Five Nights at Freddy's treats William Afton and Springtrap like two separate characters a lot of the time. That's why Scraptrap isn't actually named Scraptrap, it's named Afton, because that is post-Springtrap. The novel trilogy that gets brought up in the Potential and Problems, I like to call them the Charlie trilogy just to make it a bit easier for myself to recognize them, goes so far as to have William renounce the Springtrap identity in the third book and say he was a fool and high on power and everything. Yeah, I don't remember the exact wording. It's been forever since I read that book. But I don't know. I don't think Springtrap himself necessarily needed a very thorough bio. I would have liked a bit more on William, but with the established through line that William and Springtrap are treated separately because Springtrap is a very brief stint in William's life, I kind of expected this. And I also think it's mildly funny to not discuss the fact that one of his add-ons I'm adding a lot of berries for dramatic effect, because the add-on Iridescent Remnant features a very quick, easy explanation of what Remnant actually is, and there are a lot of FNAF fans who do not know that. So I think it's actually really hilarious that we got a proper explanation of that in the Dead by Daylight crossover. I do want to move on now, because I think I've said enough about why I feel like the lore, while it would be nice, isn't actually really that, because it's very obvious where it slots with prior canon, and I don't think the actual bit we get is incoherent. It's a very quick, easy to understand bit of William gets spring-locked, falls to the ground, wakes up sometime later, the pizzeria is in shambles, and I think the obvious implication, at least, is that the entity is playing the children's sounds to lure him to the kitchen so that they can take him into the fog. And he's like, whatever, because he's Springtrap. He doesn't have anything else to do at this point. Doesn't take place between FNAF, I guess technically between Sister Location and 3, because Sister Location now is known to take place after FNAF 1. Timeline stuff's weird. Anyway, I don't agree that it's incoherent. I don't agree that it's debatably existent, and I don't anything remotely interesting in terms of character or plot line or the bit of that sentence confuses me, because we get a lot of William's character shown off in his in-game voice lines. We get the pure power, like powerful, like eccentric, theatric, like showboating, power hungry, like, or not even power hungry, but going on a power trip version of William, who is finally, at long last, cheated death. And then if he gets stunned, he throws a little temper tantrum, because he is an immature baby who preyed on children to kill because they were the easiest targets. He can't handle anything actually happening. Pizza Sim has him declare that he knew he was in a trap and is only showing up because he wants to. Which I have a lot of issues with William's characterization across Five Nights at Freddy's as a whole. But I think that with the bio itself doesn't quite contain in character, We still get it. We still get his character. We still get his character. Plot, sure, we could have had more. But if I'm being honest, I don't think Springtrap himself needed it. Especially because William Afton is such a meme. Springtrap and William Afton Five Nights at Freddy's has kind of like always been a part of meme culture since its release. Like, it very much like made itself a seat. And I feel like at this point, everyone kind of knows who William is in one way or another. Do I think it'd be nice? Again, yes, having a brief summary of William's involvement with Freddy's, how he did the murders and everything, blah, blah, blah. Sure. But it's not necessary for this chapter, I don't think. Now the power, I have a lot more to say about the power. So, the Five Nights at Freddy's chapter, featuring Springtrap as the killer, I cannot imagine the power was hard to figure out, because what do you give an animatronic rabbit that really doesn't do much in his own game besides crawl through vents? You know, I do not envy being the power designer, but I think the idea of a lot of what he says about the power in particular is just not correct. Because this is my thing, and I think I left this comment on one of his videos previously. His Year Dead by Daylight Sold Its Soul video. With Springtrap in the title, by the way, which I have a lot to say about that. That the power Springtrap could have had that a lot of the community feels there's just not a lot they could do. So many things tied to powers that are related to FNAF 3 and Springtrap are already done in Dead by Daylight. FNAF 3's ventilation hours causing blackouts and hallucinations are just Judge's Nightfall and Dr. Matt respectfully. They brought his vents in through the security doors, so that's fun. Stealthing around Fazbear's Fright would be just Ghostface and Night Shroud, or Myers in Stalker mode, or the Wraith. Springtrap in FNAF 3 actually, fun fact, has a sort of built-in terror radius, because there's a single ambience file that plays when he is close to the office or a phantom is near the office. I think calling the power in itself not particularly faithful to the IP is just straight up wrong. The doors and the cameras, even though the cameras aren't well designed, they are probably the most faithful you could get to the IP, especially because Springtrap comes from the most security camera heavy game. It is, this is a case, I think, where Pixelbush kind of let his personal feelings on the franchise cloud the way he phrased his criticisms. Because I understand not finding Springtrap's power fun and finding it bland. I understand that everyone's calling it derivative because people compared it to Huntress and the Unknown, and sure, I see a lot more comparisons made to be for Unknown than Huntress. I've never gotten the Huntress comparison because Huntress's hatchets and Springtrap's fire axe control so differently, even down to the way you throw it, like what button you press to throw it. So I know I don't get that one, but Unknown I kind of get. The problem is people think orbitals and fire axe orbitals are all Springtrap's power is designed for, when the axe is really just there for you to throw into them at close range and then chase them down, grab it, yell in their face, and carry them to the hook. That's the intent of the design. The orbitals are just kind of a byproduct of the way the fire axe is made. He also calls the power unproblematic but ultimately flavorless, almost offensively inoffensive. And I don't disagree. And I think part of that comes from Springtrap's design being intended for newer players. But also, no, because Springtrap being implemented also rewrote the way killer props spawn in your generators, which in turn made Sadako a bit stronger. Not too much, but like it gave the TVs more of a chance to spawn closer to generators now, which pretty cool. If you're one of the Sadako mains, congrats, you get that because we added the funny rabbit man. Uh, and I don't, again, so like, I get this one, because Springtrap is just kind of middle of the road, but I think that's not, like, it doesn't, well, no, this is the most requested chapter, they said, so I understand wanting some, like, new ground, like, something super revolutionary, or something, like, genuinely worth the years of hype. But also, as a FNAF fan, I enjoy the power, and I think it's a really well done way. The Fire Axe gave, the Fire Axe Mark Springtrap was the first one to have, the first killer to get a change in movements, a base movement speed, by getting rid of something, in terms of, like, throwing the axe. And you can do that without throwing a survivor. There's actually a lot more to Springtrap's power than I feel like people remember. And a lot of it stems from the fact that survivors just don't use the doors, and they don't use the cameras. And that is a behavior fault. Behavior utterly failed in adapting the cameras properly, but they did adapt them. And they did adapt the doors, and survivors not making use of that is not a fault of the killer, it is a fault of behavior. Because behavior gave them no incentive, they gave them no reason. And it is a tough fix they're going to have to make in the future. They're going to have to change the way the cameras and the doors work in order to really hone in on Springtrap. Now, I going back to the whole Springtrap isn't strong or fun argument, I agree he's not super strong. Again, I say he's B- tier, and I think he could be better with some small tweaks and quality of life changes. But fun is subjective. If you don't find Springtrap fun, that's fine. There are plenty of people, myself included, who do. There are people who have Springtrap P100. There are people who have made entire pivots on mains to Springtrap. Hell, he was gonna be my main before I fell in love with Ghostface. There are plenty of people who still to this day play him, and I think there is a reason for that. Besides, I like playing it's Springtrap. I love Springtrap. Love from Five Nights at Freddy's. It's because the power they gave him ended up being fun. The axe orbitals are fun. He's just dripping with personality because of the voice work put in by PJ Haywood or Matthew Lillard if you're playing the Yellow Rabbit skin. There's more to that than just, oh, we have the FNAF IP, let's put in a killer from the FNAF IP. There is more value outside of just the IP, and I think it's kind of unfair to say that there isn't, and that it doesn't suit your taste, and I get that, and I 100% agree that this chapter is not intended for everyone, and I don't imagine it was easy, because I've heard that Scott was very closely monitoring how they handled Springtrap. And again, I have my nitpicks with Springtrap. I have my personal issues. I am not fond of the Fire Axe being so central to his power. I wish it was a bit less important. But also lobbing it at survivors and hitting them in the back, and then grabbing them and pulling it out and yelling in their face, and then picking them up and slamming them in a wall if you have the time next to a hook is pretty fun. Would I care? Would I be disappointed if he had been a basic M1 with a knife? No, not really. I wasn't expecting the Fire Axe, because the Fire Axe is such a crucial part of the community's fanon that I just kind of assumed they wouldn't do it. And for some reason, I don't know how I forgot that, oh, Scott watches the community, he knows what they want. Obviously, he's going to ask them to put the Fire Axe in. And lo and behold, the Fire Axe is here. I wish the Fire Axe, or I wish had been less important. I wish the doors and the cameras had more use and were much more, there was more incentive to use them. But I'm a big supporter of the stance that this power is good for Springtrap. Springtrap himself is authentic to his character. The power is more and the map in general really is more a culmination of the franchise. The idea that I don't know if people remember, the Fire Axe isn't faithful to IP. He's never used the Fire Axe. The Fire Axe represents the community, which is a core part of Five Nights at Freddy's. Five Nights at Freddy's is as big as it is because its community is so loyal and diehard, and so loud, and so proud, and while also being very critical. There are a lot of very critical FNAF fans, and I myself am one of them. I used to be a very, like, positive, everything's perfect type of fan with Five Nights at Freddy's. And then I play more games. But what I love about FNAF's never changed. What I criticize more is out of love, if that makes sense. I'm a critic out of love for a franchise or a game or whatever. So I don't see what other way they could have done this power. Now Pixel Bush, and I really don't even think he's watching, did make a power that is just kind of the night, but different in that it uses the lockers like Dredge. But I think it's very interesting. The idea of summoning the animatronics is kind of pulled out of the Twisted Ones, but I feel that for a license using a character from a video game, you would want to use the video game as a basis and not the random novel that not everyone has read, you know? I do agree with him that Charlotte Emily from the novel trilogy would have been a good choice for Survivor. It's not one I considered. I mostly wanted to stick with games when I was thinking of Survivors, but Michael and Henry don't really have the necessary designs in the game universe to bring them in, so whatever. Again, I really don't care that FNAF didn't get a Survivor. I just wanted Springtrap, and I'm happy with what I got. The final line that I feel really encapsulates my issues with this segment of the video is that, and this is just a quote from Pixel Bush, deeply forgettable release from a deeply forgettable IP with a deeply forgettable power and purse, which makes for a deeply forgettable anniversary chapter. I cannot take anything he said super serious, objective reasonings when he ends with this statement, because sure, the perks are forgettable, the powers may be forgettable. Springtrap's release, the Five Nights at Freddy's IP, and the anniversary chapter itself, I would argue, are anything but forgettable. Maybe you forgot them. In fact, I think that's actually why you used this, going off this reply to a comment being like, are you crazy for calling it forgettable? You forgetting him does not make it objectively forgettable, though. Five Nights at Freddy's, as a chapter, broke Dead by Daylight's player count peak. In fact, I don't think it's ever gotten close since Five Nights at Freddy's in the year. Jason might break that, and I wholeheartedly want him to, actually, but I think that kind of disproves right off the bat that this was a very forgettable release. Never mind the fact that Five Nights at Freddy's has been around for almost 12 years and is still kicking. It's getting a third movie. We just got a VR port for the newest game. There's more books on the way. There might be more movies after the third. We're getting another game, probably, to answer things with the Mimic. This franchise isn't dead, and let's be honest, it's not forgettable because it invades so much of internet culture. How many times have you just opened a video and heard the or any like reference to Freddy Fazbear or anything? This is not a forgettable IP by any means. Even if you don't like it, it still leaves kind of an impression of, oh, that's a neat little novelty gimmick sitting in the office and using the cameras. Right? Like the Sit and Survive, it's still a small impression. This statement to me, I feel, culminates with Pixel Bush's disdain for FNAF and Scott Cawthon and lack of interest in the chapter release. And listen, you cannot like Five Nights at Freddy's, you can disagree with Scott Cawthon, I know I do, and you can admit that the Five Nights at Freddy's chapter was not for you. I have no problem with this. My problem comes from being a prominent Dead by Daylight content creator, and for lack of a better way to phrase this without sounding super rude, kind of just actively insulting a franchise that kicked off the year and with an amazing start. Like, I had to sit up from my chair to say this. There's nothing wrong with not liking this franchise, and trust me, I understand. I understand being someone who has been in this franchise so long and been with the community for so long and witnessed the highs and the very, very low lows. But you were reviewing the entire last year of this game that it is primarily your content, if not only your content. Yes, you gave the disclaimer like, oh, this is where I start getting really mean and kind of slandering the IP, whatever, in a very like jokey tone. And I get that you have these opinions, but if you're I think anyway, if you're reviewing something, you need to at least try and put your opinions aside, because let's be perfectly clear, Springtrap is still a very often played killer. I mean, Nightlight within the last month, last 28 days specifically, still has him at number 4 in the pick rate. Now, I know Nightlight isn't 100% accurate, but it's all we've got. And yeah, sure, his kill rate's low, it's 47-ish. But he still has the 4th highest pick rate. And within the last 28 days, according to Nightlight. It is not, by any means, a chapter that can be forgotten, an IP that can be forgotten, a release. Like, there is no forgetting this. It happened. This franchise that people have been begging for a collaboration for basically 9 years happened. It is really hard for me to phrase how I feel about this, because like, I understand that this year was not great for Dead by Daylight. This is my first year of Dead by Daylight, and I've already felt and seen just the community become somewhat in shambles with things like Survivor, just like in general, the way everything has become with the general state and balance and functionality. But I think making this video making this section of a video rather, after having him on the thumbnail as the year Dead by Daylight sold its soul, makes it clear that you were not in the mind space to properly review this, because I don't really said how a lot of what Pixel Bush said is accurate, because as a Five Nights at Freddy's veteran might remember, who has devoted way too much of my brain and time and energy into knowing and understanding this character and the story and the lore, picking apart the game design and everything with it. This is probably the best we could have gotten with Springtrap. I know a lot of people are going to disagree with that, but let's sit down for a second and let's really put our heads together and think. FNAF doesn't have a lot of options for Survivor, especially if you're going to pull from the games, just like the killer, and keep the continuity together. A lot of his powers, a lot of fan-made powers are already kind of done, and they aren't unique. They actually, I would call a lot of the fan-made powers more derivative and bland than the one we got for him, but sorry, but that's just kind of how I feel. And to be honest, I'm fine with the fact that they just poured everything they could into making his design, mannerisms, and voice authentic, making the power fun and easy to get a hold of, while making it clear what continuity they were sticking with. And yeah, it's I can't say it's disappointing to hear Pixel Blush say all this, because I get it. FNAF is a franchise that very much deserves its criticism. But I feel like this doesn't come from a place of wanting to be accurate with what was and wasn't well done with the game, and more, I need to get my frustrations about this franchise out finally, and I'm going to use this section of the video to do it. Which is fair, but you should have really maybe just done that in a separate video. Especially because if you want to talk about forgettable chapters, I would wholeheartedly say Sinister Grace has been much more forgotten than Springtrap. Where's Crossy one on Nightlight? That's 37. 37. In the last 28 days, according to Nightlight. Again, not 100% accurate, but wow, yeah. The only real saving grace Sinister Grace had was V as a survivor. That's insane. So yeah, I don't think FNAF is the deeply forgettable release here. This is the end of the video. I'm gonna wrap this up here because I didn't want to make this. That's not true. I wanted to make this video, but I do really want to make a very much more positive review of Springtrap, and I'm still working on that. I just wanted to make this because I really did not feel like Pixel Bush accurately explained the issues with the FNAF chapter and its inclusion, and I just wanted to get my thoughts and voice out because I respect the dedication to reviewing the entire year and making constant videos on character lore and sticking with, again, Skull Merchant as your killer. But I don't think this was good. I don't think this was a good section of the video. I don't really think the best way I could describe this is it comes across as being negative for the sake of negative. And granted, you made it clear how you feel about this franchise, and I wanted to get your emotions and thoughts out. And again, I had no problem with that. I don't think this was the video for it. People will probably disagree. That's fine. That's fine. I get it. This is just how I feel. It's just how I feel in this whole thing, because Pixel Bush is, again, a fairly well-known, respected content creator. And a lot of the comments I'm noticing also very heavily disagree with the FNAF section. And I think it's kind of clear that for a review video, you lean too much into your bias. And that's fine. That happens. It's just that is kind of going to get people disagreeing. And I wanted to do this, and I wanted to do it very, hopefully I did it very respectfully. Maybe I didn't get things clear. Maybe, I don't know. I'm recording this at like almost like after 10 o'clock in the night. And I'm feeling very, very, very upset by the Ghostface performances in Best of the Worst, because I did not realize just how poorly my boy had it, I guess. Even though I've been playing him for majority of the year I've played this game. Springtrap is my second highest prestige, by the way, in case people were curious. Yeah, that's all I have to say about this. I really hope that this doesn't blow up, because I don't want this to be like, I don't want to start beef with Pixel Bush. I don't want people thinking like, oh, you fucking hate him. No. 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 No, 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 no. If you've watched this whole video and you genuinely think I hate this man for daring to slander Five Nights at Freddy's, don't. That's all I can really say is don't. He is a person entitled to his opinions. I just disagree with the way he expressed it and the way he said it so objectively, and why I think it is just not correct objectively anyway. But yeah, hopefully the next video is more positive. I want to do a stream for the Jason PTB if I haven't done that already by the time this comes out. And I do want to get a full, proper FNAF veteran view of the Springtrap chapter out to celebrate a year of it being in the fog. Yeah, alright, that's it. Thank you all for watching. If you have any thoughts on what I said or what Pixelbush said, please go and comment. I am very curious what some people think, but I'm done. I'm done. I've said my piece, and I quite frankly, yeah. Bye.